Hi guys, it's Ollie from Rad Season. Welcome to the Rad Season show. I'm super excited to be joined today by one of the inventors of the mountain bike and the founder of Fisher Bicycle, the man himself, Gary Fisher.
Thank you very much. It's
Gary, how are you? Welcome to the show.
well, it's been like totally different. Um, 2 years ago was the last big trip I went on to. I went to Thailand and spent a week and a half there, and we had 900 of our best customers came. All of our distributors from
Mhm.
Southeast Asia showed up, and oh, it was so much fun. That whole time we went away to a resort and rode road bikes all over the place. And this guy, Nati, who handles Thailand, he does this thing with he has his ambassador riders, and these are
Mhm.
riders on the road that will help you regain the field if you get dropped. If you get dropped, they'll ride with you,
Oh,
and just
okay.
pull you and do stuff like that. It's the best thing. It's like you got a domestique for you, and he does this for everybody on the ride. It's amazing. He organizes his team. His team is amazing, and they've been doing this a long time. They do two big rides a year, and so that year we decided, to bring all our Southeast Asia distributors down
Yeah.
there and their best customers and everything. And man, I've stayed home, and it's been amazing because you might not believe this, but I'll tell you, I got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. And they're so much fun. And my wife, she's a doctor. And then we got an au pair. She's a
Mhm.
family doctor. We got an au pair. And it's all been good. It's been amazing. I've never been so close to my kids, in my life. And I got other kids, holy Toledo. So it's been really a completely different year,
Yeah.
for me. And at the same time, the bike company Trek that I've worked for now 29 years is just takes care of me.
Yeah.
And I do things for them, but all from home and everything.
Okay.
And it's been great. I've been doing some more design work on the actual, I got ideas for bikes and stuff.
Oh, really?
So, oh, sure, and modifications to current stuff we have, because it's not endlessly the bikes evolve,
Yeah.
it's amazing. There's been more change in mountain bikes in the last 5 years than the 25 years previous to that, and it's exciting, what's going on. People, and that's all about people accepting, new crazy ideas and accepting to go out on a limb with it and try things out because these new things, they work.
Do you reckon before then they were a bit hesitant to kind of
Oh,
try something new then, and it was sort of like,
well, it was like the 90s were the worst because they were just sort of like overgrown road bikes. You know what I'm saying? No suspension, or the suspension they had was sort of bogus. It didn't really work. Or denial of suspension. That it was hard, and the bikes got lighter and lighter, and everything became flimsier, and the brakes didn't work, and ah, but we got out of that.
yeah,
Suspension came along, and they actually became bikes and the trails. That's what really evolved. It went from they would found trails, and some of the races in the early cross country days with Norba and everything. There were these, they were awful. It's before trail builders existed.
yeah,
That for mountain bikes, and that's the miracle, and that's makes it fun, even more
yeah.
fun. And building trails, being really exact about it. Things like Red Bull Rampage, or else it's
Mhm.
either get the math right or you're right or
It's a
dies.
proper science now, isn't it? Sort of like with all
Absolutely.
the algorithms and
And,
everything, and
and then the other is like, not the other hand, not making it too manicured. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Keeping the natural part in it. And of course, Mother Nature always helps with rain, snow,
yeah,
landslides, stuff like that. So it's like, it's there's an incredible body of knowledge
yeah.
on how to build a trail these days, and it's possessed by mountain bikers more than any other entity out there on the trail.
Nice. Well, I guess if I'd love to kind of take it back to before mountain biking, if that's all right, because you originally started off with road bikes. Was that sort of like when you were in your early teens? Is that kind of?
Oh yeah, I was like 12, and I wanted to go the next level. I was like, I'd been riding around town with my friends, my two other best friends, Bill Vickery and Jerry Draper, and we take our Raleigh 3 speeds to basically what we were riding everywhere, all over town, up and all over the place. But for a kid, I mean, we were real small, and it wasn't very far and everything. Then I went to the next level, which is at 12 and a half. I Salmon Tail Bike Shop, and there were some bike riders hanging out there, and real ones, with in a proper club. And they I wanted to ride with them. I said, "Hey, I want to ride with you." And they said, "No, you're too small. You're too small." And I said, "Come on, I can do it. I can do it." And I started riding with them, and they couldn't get rid of me, And at the end of the day, they said, "Okay, we'll let you be in the club. We'll make you a mascot." And I started crying. I don't want to be a mascot. I want to be a real member.
Was that Belmont then, like Belmont Bike Club, or
Belmont Bike Club, the BBC, and it was led by Larry Walpole, who was a Pan American mechanic down there in, just south of San Francisco at the airport, and he was an East Londoner, and oh my God, his accent was thick, and he had the sense of humor, and he made sure I'd finish the rides. And the rides were sometimes like 80 miles, had a bunch of big hills and stuff. And I got strong. I got a tough little kid, I was like, I was like 4'5" and 89 pounds, and my mother took a jersey and cut it and sewed it back so it sort of fit better and everything. And there was no other kids that my age, and there were 120 registered bike riders in the Amateur Bicycle League of America. And anyone who was serious about bikes signed up, at that time. And in all of Northern California, 120 riders, Northern California, Nevada, the district. And it had grown out of nothing almost. I mean, before that, there were riders in the 50s, but very, very few. I mean, road cycling almost died. There was no championships for quite a number of years until 1965. They had a national road championships in LA. And that was a big deal.
And was there like was there regular races then? Was it like kind of every weekend you were kind of going somewhere else in the state?
It was. I did 30 races the first year.
Oh wow.
And we traveled all over the place. Sacramento, Fresno, Nevada City, tour of Nevada City. That was a great race. Tour of Redwood City. That was a crit. And there were a bunch of races. Lake Merced. And it was much easier to put on races in those days because the roads weren't as traveled. There was, 1/3 the population in California, for instance. And, there wasn't the regulation with the police and everything. You didn't have to pay exorbitant amounts to, and that really stunts road racing in the States right now. It's no wonder we have so many crits because it's really hard to afford a rolling road closure right now.
Mm-hmm.
Back in those days, man, it was pretty wide open. And then we had a velodrome down in San Jose. The Hellier Velodrome opened in 63, the next year.
Okay.
And there was a track culture that had been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I learned from the Gatto brothers, or San Jose group. Don Peterson was, perennial there. And then an Italian came over, Marcello Mugelli, and he taught me basic track racing. I was like 13, 14.
That's amazing. Were you learning to be a bike mechanic as well then? Or were you kind of getting like going to the shop and getting the guys to kind of...
San Mateo Bike Shop. I started, on assembling Stingrays and orange crates. It was a Schwinn shop as well. Okay. And so I eventually went through the whole Schwinn school training. So, I was a real young kid. I did all the books there. Larry Ellsworth was my boss, he taught me, how to hot patch a tube with an inner tube, we light the stuff on fire and then heat it up and then slap the patch on. We used to patch tubes, right there in the shop, so wooden floor deep with grease, you know what I'm saying? Black. Yeah, back in that day.
And what happened, like, so around like the mid 60s, there was a bit of a movement, and you kind of
yeah.
You kind of like dropped off cycling. Like, did you just
that was a different thing. I was like, what happened there was Tom Pruce was a member of the Belmont Bike Club, and Tom's family owned Pruce Pharmacies.
Okay.
And they would take the pharmaceutical LSD to Stanford University for the tests they were doing there. And everything. And that Tom got into it, and then he got into, like, he met people in the movement, Ken Kesey, Grateful Dead, a lot of different people. And then he put on a bike race where the Grateful Dead showed up. Well, they didn't show up, man. He did on the Friday, they did a ride. They all met. It was a convoy down, started at the Ferry Building, two big convertibles, one with the Grateful Dead, one with the Quicksilver Messenger Service. We had some Playboy bunnies. They stopped at the Playboy Club. I couldn't go in. Then we all met up at the City Hall. We got the key from a mayor at the time. I can't even remember who it was, back in 60. God, it was 66. Got the key from the mayor, and then we rode en masse, down to Redwood City, and we got the key from the mayor down there. And then I met the band on the ride. I was going crazy, doing crazy stuff on my bike and stuff. Anyway, then we get to, Friday night, man, Friday afternoon, I get a ride with my friend over to Pescadero. Pescadero is over the hill, down the other side by the water, by the ocean. And there's this place called it's still there, the IDES Hall. And the band was going to play there. The band's, and out back was a straw field, a field of straw flowers. Beautiful. And I go running back there with girl Freiberg, and she just grabs me, starts making out with me and stuff. She was like one of the band members of the Quicksilvers, what was referred to as an old lady back then. It was just like my introduction, And so I met the bands, met Jerry Garcia, hung out with Garcia a lot, He taught me how to do this. Roll J, It's crazy. And then I hung out with those guys, with the Dead, for about 4 years after that, and did a lot of different things. Like worked at the Carousel Ballroom, which was 6 months, only lasted. But man, it was high quality. We just lost a bunch of money,
And were you doing like the lighting for them for their concerts and stuff?
In the last few years I was there, I did developed a light show, and I did that, with a high school friend of mine, Alan Cooper. And Alan Cooper turned out to be the father of Visual Basic, and he had a company called Cooper.com, which he sold a few years ago, and a whole floor in a skyscraper in San Francisco was that business. And he had clients like Sony, IBM. It's like he wrote the book about it's software programming and how you do it and how you make it intuitive. And he wrote the book called The Inmates Are Running the Asylum, which was basically about how engineers could run the show, which is an awful thing, because then this stuff is incredibly boring and it doesn't do what you're supposed to do, and you gotta say, hey man, that's no good. You gotta do it this way. Okay. You got it. No, we can't do it that way because of this and that. And say, well, you can, but you just got to start over, and you don't want to do that. I know this. Anyway, we did light shows together. We developed a thing and we put it together, and we did a lot of the venues and everything. We did it for the Dead a number of times, and then it just got shut down by Bill Graham, the whole thing. That was a whole adventure. Bill Graham was the preeminent promoter,
Okay.
at the time in San Francisco. And I worked for him too. I knew Bill well. He was good. He was hard on people. People would go, "Oh man, that's not cool, Bill." But Bill was right. And the thing with the light shows, I mean, a band could publicize itself with radio, and that's how they did it. And light shows didn't look good on radio. And then there were light shows. Bill figured it out. He'd get a light show in there and pay him like $100 a night, which was nothing, because you'd have 10 people, and the bulbs, just burning the bulbs, you'd burn $100 worth of bulbs a night. You can't do that. But he had a passageway from the light show booth up into the rafters across to backstage. Oh, you get to meet the band. Everybody wants to play for free, and it was crap. It was just like bad moving wallpaper.
Yeah,
and not good. And that's what it was looking like. And at the same time, I was getting burned out on the scene. I couldn't handle the night scene, and I went down and rode in LA with an old friend of mine. We rode 10 miles. I had to sleep the rest of the day, and I go, "The hell with this." I was like, 21 years old, and I'm going to get back in shape. So I moved out of the city, moved to a place in Kentfield with a band called New Riders of the Purple Sage, which was an offshoot of the Grateful Dead. And I just, I didn't have any rent. I just take care of the house. It was a pretty cool scene. And so I started riding my bike a whole bunch. And in 1 year, I got back to category 1.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, I mean, it shocked me too, because I'd grown up during those years as far as I wasn't a small kid anymore, And
wasn't there some issues with the Rolling Stones at the time as well, when they were going to play in San Francisco? And
oh my God, the Altamont. That was the end. I mean, that was the end of the scene in San Francisco. I was right there when they were like right in the organizing meetings for that thing, and it's such a miracle more people didn't die in that thing. Like if there was no wind during that day, if there was sometimes there get to be big gusty winds right through that area, and like, man, the towers were just scaffolding. It was crazy, and
wow.
help in the Bear, Owsley, he put it together, but he did a damn good job with cables and stuff and anchoring it from the right angles and everything. But man, there were people climbing on that shit and they wouldn't come down, it was just out of hand. No security, because we had the Angels. And how could you ever hire the Angels? Well, we had a history of hiring the Angels. We met, Ken Kesey out in La Honda, place where I used to go ride all the time. Tom Pruce, the rest of the gang in the BBC, Larry Welple. We were right by Kesey's place all the time. And he had a scene going on, and the Angels were part of it, and then we'd see the Angels down at the store in San Gregorio and or Pescadero or something, and they'd look at us and we'd look at them and we'd just say, "Hey, freaks," and they'd talk, we'd bullshit, and everything. They were cool. They weren't scary at all, and then later we used to use them for security. We used them at the Carousel Ballroom. We didn't have any bad incident. I remember one night we had Janis Joplin, one night only, and it was one of their big parties, and those guys were great. And then the San Francisco Tax Squad, the police, they show up, with all their gear on and everything. And it means a huge line of Harley motorcycles and all the Tax Squad guys facing off. Diffuse it. Be cool. Everything was cool. We cooled it out. Everybody cooled it out. But Altamont, it went crazy because it was a 4-foot high stage. Anybody could jump up on that thing. And there wasn't a good backstage pass list. So all of a sudden there are 100 beautiful women back there, and the Angels just letting them all in. And it's like, the band managers saying, "What the fuck?" It's out of control. Yeah. It's out of control. And when an Angel feels out of control, they get violent. And I'll tell you, though, it was like an Angel, I feel, that saved Mick Jagger's life that night. This guy, Meredith Hunter, comes with a big 45, man. He says, "I've been sent to finish this guy off. I hate, because his girlfriend is in love with Mick Jagger and he's going to kill Mick Jagger." Right?
Oh, my God.
No security. Angel, Pow! That was the Angel security.
Yeah.
So anyway, the dream is over. Everybody's going like, this is screwed. We can't do this, you know? And Bill Graham, he took over and did things right. Finally, you know, he did. And he basically didn't like the light shows because he had a big run-in early on with one of the big light show guys, Jerry Abrams. They were up in Toronto, and Jerry showing these naked women. And the cops are, you know, beating on the door, you know, no nudity. You can't show that to the public. How was that? And Bill was going to get shut down. And Jerry, turn it off. No way. No way. Boom, boom, boom. You know, I tell you, all these things throughout history, it's always about incidences, people, you know, it's not about principle so much.
Yeah. And you thought, right, okay, you know, you just wanted to get out, have a change, get fit again, get back on the bike, and
the bike never lied to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The bike is like an honest thing, and bike racing, I always felt like I would love to do this forever. You know, it's so much fun, you know, the whole thing. It you know, and the bike, I think to a lot of us, it represents efficiency, you know, sort of a frugal life in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of fit that whole side, you know, and appealed that way. But it's still, you know, when you look at all the benefits that comes out of it and the benefits to what's going on now. I mean, if we ever want to do, if you ever thought that you wanted to do something for global warming, it's called micro size it, you know.
Yeah.
And that's like what the micro mobility thing is about, is just an appropriate amount of energy to move you, and not a whole lot more. Not your kitchen, not your rumpus room, not your toolbox, you know, everywhere you go, which is what, you know, the American car is these days. You know, people drive an SUV and they can take anything with them, and they feel like I got to have that, you know. And the way things are built up, it's like it's so not conducive to it never was, you know. I mean, I remember being a kid, you know, like 12 years old, and this cop wants me to ride on a sidewalk all the way home, and I'm 20 miles away from home, you know. It's like, oh, come on, man.
So when when you left then, you then started racing again, and was that when you were studying? Like, so you went to, didn't you go to San Francisco Art Institute, and then you were doing?
I did do that, and I didn't stay long at all. I got an honors, and I did film and photography, and I got an honors in film.
Okay.
I did one film, a couple of films there. Did one on my bike. And I just cut it really well, and it was super easy to cut. Yep. And I had a photography thing too. It like fit in with my light show thing, because I'd been doing I had a Hasselblad camera that I got.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I did a lot of nice work with the light show. A lot of nice work, and with Alan, and made machines. We made all of our own stuff, you know. I mean, there wasn't a single projector that wasn't modified. You know, it was like had 16 millimeter film projectors with a separate fan over the gate and the bulb. Okay. So, and then a new motor. So instead of, you know, it's 24 frames a second, I made it 0 to 60 frames a second. And it was these old Keystone projectors. They'd run it, you know, man. I could ramp them up that fast. And you look at something going that fast, 60, and they use that, you know, now in the, you know, the high resolution stuff, because it makes stuff more resolute. When you slow it down to 1 frame a second, and you use a black film, and you take the air off of the gate, it goes poof, poof, as it, you know, the bubbles come and everything as it burns. Each frame, each. Oh, it's so much fun. You know, but it was all this stuff, you know, like was modified. And then there'd be like color wheels on that were Cinemoid, which was a brand of gelatin that came in many, many different colors. And they'd be on DC motors, and they'd be 0 to 60 RPM with, oh man, those are on goosenecks. And the whole, like each slide projector, I had 8 slide projectors that were on a system of rails where you'd be able to move them back and forth. You couldn't even see it move on the screen because it was so stable, so massive. I made all these things. Each one had 8 ball bearing, cartridge bearings on it. It was like in the late 60s, man. I'd go to all the surplus stores and just buy all this crazy stuff, and later I worked for Stuart Brand because we were trying to make the catalog of catalogs. That's the Whole Earth catalog. Remember that thing?
Okay, yeah.
I worked for him. He was a friend, and that was the project, going to make the catalog of the most bitchin' catalogs. So we go to the surplus stores and you'd always be asking for catalogs.
Yeah.
All these different crazy companies and what they make and different things, and try to find it, and try to get it or order some of the stuff, So you'd have to order some things, other stuff you'd collect, like glass clock faces. I have a tremendous stash of this with these are the things that you do the liquids in. And the liquids were oil-based and alcohol-based. And I still have some of the oils made by Walter of Garden of Delights. He was the best chemist for making this stuff that was incredibly clear. You could take a whole quart and you could see all the way through it. And then you take one drop and it was like dense. And you can mix it with clear oil and color it beautifully. Just this beautiful, super transparent stuff, So...
It was that like how you got into writing as well? Because then did that sort of when you started around
writing? I was with Bicycling Mag, the guy from Bill Fields, who was a sales guy of advertising salesman for bicycling magazines for many years. He was incredible, famous, And he walked into my shop and said, "Hey, I've heard about you and your writing and everything. Can you write? Could you do a column?" And man, I'd never done anything like that in my life. I was not a good student in English. Oh, geez. But I forced myself to. I'm going to do this. And I worked for him for 8 years.
And you were like basically just a tester, right? So you were testing.
Yeah.
And then writing about it and
right. And it was a lot of it was a source of free bikes to me all the time too. I'd always like to get the bikes I could actually ride in the races and stuff too. But I tested all kinds of stuff. It isn't, testers today have got a lot more stuff to test, and they use much more, many more good devices to do the actual tests. All testing. My stuff was all a lot of subjective things, but and feel things, how I felt on the thing. It's the testers now. It's a different job.
Yeah,
it really is. It's. I mean, you think about the bikes too. I mean, the bikes in the 70s were sort of like regulation pieces. Like in the 60s and 70s, you take a Campanella rear derailleur and look at the back of it, and it would have a number stamped on it. That was the year it was made, and that's how you could tell the group. That was the most, other than, every 2 or 3 years, they'd change the shape of one part and one component, or something. It was like, it was really, really easy to keep up on the changes because there were very few of them back then,
And did you think, did that sort of inspire you to go, all right, I'm going to try and come up with some ideas and how did that then evolve into going off-road?
No, the going off-road thing was, I'd gone off-road on a cyclocross bike, right? Okay. And that was like when I was a kid, when we were living down in Burlingame. And then we moved to Marin in 1966, I mean, a lot of changes. And in high school, Redwood High School, there were some guys, they were like, obviously hippies. And it was like my friend, it's real close to where I live today. It's a few blocks away, and he was a few blocks away from me. I live in my parents' house now, which is crazy. And when I was a kid here, the kid a few blocks away was in this Larkspur Canyon gang, and we both went to Redwood High. And I met all the other guys in the gang, and it was basically, it started out, it was like drum circles, drumming, Casey Sonnerband and Clunkert, and and then it was like bikes, And the bikes and scene was, to do the drums, you do the drums out of Mount Tamalpais. I mean, it was like Mount Tamalpais was in the early 60s, you could drive any vehicle you wanted out there. Mm-hmm. And then about 66, 60, they put the chains on the gates. And then you could ride a bike out there. And Larkspur Canyon Gang was a culture of hippie kids, drum circles, and then the clunker scene. And the clunker scene for them was, getting a bike for $5 because you could literally buy a bicycle for $5 that was good enough to go and ride out there. And the bikes, there were, there was a few of them that were, they approached me and said, "Oh, we know you're into bikes. You got to come check this out." And it came out and it was like, wow, it hit me right then. Here I was like a junior in high school, and I'm out riding with them on, big fat tire bikes. And I'm going like, this is a lot of fun because you go really fast, without like a puncture. Because the problem with the cross bike, I'd go out on a cross bike, and I had a proper cross bike. I had a Mundia cyclocross bike, and you go out in the woods and you take 3 tires over your shoulder and you'd ride for an hour and then you'd patch tires for 3 hours. It was ridiculous. Oh, wow. You couldn't, there were so many rocks and stuff and you'd want to let loose, and big hills, long descents. I mean, a mile long descent or something, 2 miles long, and you don't want to have to mince down it. You want to be able to let loose and go and and get the terminal speed.
Yeah.
So, cross bike was stupid out there, and this like made sense, a lot of sense. And well, I got a couple my own clunkers and everything around then in high school. And then I went away for 4 years and hung out with the Grateful Dead. And then I came back to Marin more when I was like, 72 around then. Mm-hmm. And I immediately started getting into road racing again. Then I met Charlie Kelly too. And he was another roadie, and everybody's saying, "Oh, you got to meet this guy," because he looks like you. He had long hair like me, and he rode an orange Colnago. I had an orange Colnago too. Yeah. Okay. So I rode with him one day, and he said, "Hey, I got a place." Cool. And he was a roadie for a band called the Sons of Champlain, which was the classic, those guys, they did a tremendous first album. It was a double album. Mm-hmm. They went out on the road to go promote it. They ran out of weed and they said, "Forget about it. Let's go home." So they went home, and forever they were always doing this. They'd have and they were what you call them musicians, and finally Bill Champlin wound up with Chicago, and they got Emmys and all this sort of thing, And the other band, they played for 30 years, and they were like the favorites, and their shows would always be packed, but they never made any kind of money, nothing, But the Charlie's house was a lot of fun because it was right there at the center where you could train, It was really great. I loved that part. And then I decided to start a company, and I said, "Charlie, you want to be in this thing?" And so we raised $600 and started MountainBikes, and I thought of that name, right there, basically. I've been thinking about it, and I've been doing work behind it. It was like, it wasn't until 79 until you could buy an alloy rim, you had to use a steel rim. And if you used a steel rim, Joe Breeze's first bikes used steel rims, when he first brought them out, and he's cantilever brakes from Diacompi, which were, weak. And then I used bicycle cable, which compresses. Oh my God, man. And it's like in the rain, forget about it, no way. And we used, before that, it was like always, like what I use, what I popularized, and people started doing, guys like Alan Bonds. I started my little thing doing bikes for, I made a bike for Charlie, I made a bike for his friend Fred, and then I made a bike for Bob Burrows. That was it. The fourth bike was an interesting one because this guy, Bob, he lived down the street. He was a San Francisco fireman, but man, he was in lousy shape. And it'd been my experience that, on the roadside, somebody that's all excited, gets into it, they're not very fit at all.
Mm-hmm.
They don't wind up being road riders because road riding is too, you got to be able to have a low position. A lot of them go away from it after a little while. They get saddle sores, they get flat tires, and they say, forget about it. Bob got into this and he never quit. And this is not just an athlete.
You got him.
And I did. And you take these old steel rims, they were 40 and 42 ounces each rim. And new rims are like 10, 12 ounces.
Yeah.
And those things, they made the bike. I mean, Joe Breeze's first bike, that first beautiful piece that he made with the twin laterals, that frame is not light. The frame alone is about 11 pounds. The old Schwinn Excelsior frame, 7.5 pounds. And the Schwinn Excelsior frame, we actually did a frontal impact test on one in much later on when we were doing that on all kinds of bike. It went to 1,100 pounds, It's like a traditional road bike would be 650 pounds. That's like the amount of pressure you can put on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically, it was a jack and it pulled on the front end and pulled it in from the bottom bracket. And it had a false fork in it. So it was like this big triangulated piece of heavy steel, that wouldn't move and everything. And this is how much it took to collapse the front end. Because on a mountain bike, you needed more than a road bike. We figured that out early on. I mean, the first frames that I had made for me, which were Jeffrey Richmond, Albert Eisentraut, and Tom Ritchie. He won the race. He built more frames faster. He could build stuff a lot faster, And
so was Tom then just doing all the frames for you guys? Like, and then
in the beginning, yeah. In the very beginning, he was the premier builder of frames because he didn't fool around, man. Fuss around, and he had his moves down, and he could build a lot of frames fast. But you got to consider, I mean, I'd show up with the tubing. He had Dave and Devin do the mitering and then put them in the jigs, tack the frames together, and Tom did one thing: fillet braze, right? And you get it down, you do it right. You got to use the right magnet. You got to use a magnaflexor. You got to use the right stuff. You got to learn this stuff. You got to be good at it. Man, you don't have to go back and clean it up. It's amazing. And, he was that good. And I've had the other guy I got good was Tom Teasdale. He's another one, a Midwesterner. He was making 3 frames a month for me for like about 5 years. Tom fillet brazed for a while, and then he found out better ways to make money, make tires, make royalties off of other distributors, which is a really good, sound way, to grow and everything. I was like trying to import everything. And
so about that, I mean, where was the interest from the Japanese? Did they kind of come over and see it, or did you? That then before you went over there? Because you went on almost like a scouting mission, right, to sort of see.
Well, no, it wasn't that at all. It was like they knew this was happening because we were buying parts from the guys, BMX makers in Southern California, and Japanese. That was like their landing ground into the United States. The other place was the New York Trade Show, and I showed up and I did a presentation there in 1981. And man, this presentation was polished. This is Larry and Wendy Craig's photos. Larry Craig is a steel guitarist for Neil Young, always was. And I had this. He was a guitar repairman too, and he went on all the early clunker rides with his wife Wendy, and they had Nikon motor drive cameras, man, and they nailed it. They got some great shots of that whole time. And it's that kind of stuff. You got to realize my family's came out of Hollywood. My grandfather went to Hollywood when it was a itsy bitsy teensy weensy town. He was an editor of the Hollywood High newspaper. He went on to work for Hal B. Wallace. Hal B. Wallace is the seminal Hollywood publicist. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of that stuff. And he worked on this transition from silent movie to sound. And created what we call American Broadcast English, which is not King's English and is understandable by the complete market of American citizens. That was the idea. Anyway, he, was always, growing up, my mother taught me publicity. I mean, God, she got me in, like my friend Arthur Robbins and I went to, Disneyland. We went to the opening day. We'd go to Disneyland all the time, and we built a Disneyland in our backyard. So my mom decides to get it in the papers. So she gets it in 5 papers, including the LA Times, when I was, 7 years old, and it's like the whole thing has to be packaged right, done right.
Yeah.
And that's part of like what makes this all happen. And I put together a tremendous show, slideshow, and all the Japanese bigwigs were there, European bigwigs at the New York Bike Show. And they went, this is cool.
And that was basically introducing the sport, right? And sort of like, this is the new thing.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to want a piece of it.
We had shots, in Marin County, the Repack race, a whole bunch of those. We had shots in the Sierra Nevadas. We had shots, like in Colorado, Crested Butte. They were outstanding, and I put together a good presentation. We've been practicing it, and it's really crazy. It's like I did it with Charlie Kelly. His band member, the sound guy he toured with was Howie Hammerman for a long time. Howie Hammerman turned out to be George Lucas's 3rd employee. So we used to practice this slideshow for the Clunker group. It's George Lucas's house, his screening room. And we got it wired. It's like we do this every month. And after, a year or so, a few years, you get it wired. Yeah. So it was a real smooth show. So in that next year, after doing that bike show, I had at least 500 visitors from Japan.
Wow.
And so I'd go to Chinatown. I go buy myself some tickets. I go to an airline consolidator, ticket consolidator. It'd be $400 for a round trip ticket, and boom, I was there. And I worked with, there was the Sun Tour side of things and the Shimano side of things. There were 2 separate sort of groups. Yeah. Shimano made almost, theirs was really, almost all theirs. And there were all these other smaller groups, Sun Tour, Sagino, Nikto, Senshin. I worked with all of them and built stuff with them and showed them all the things. I said, look, I'm going to show you all this stuff. I'm going to, brain barf everything on you. I can. I remember one time Shimano asked me, Gary-san, what do they mean it's cool? We spent 45 minutes, we spent an hour talking about what it means. It's cool. Thank you. Gary-san, what does it mean it's hot? Another 45 minutes explaining that. And that's the key to all of this. It's like you have to spend the time.
Yeah.
And so your communication is clear. And I'm talking in every, not just relationships with people whose primary is a different language. It's with everything. Everybody, we all want to be heard and understood. It's like if we want to have I want mountain bike trail designers to redesign the routes in the cities. They have a feature, a go around all the time to keep you thinking. Direct routes to things. Direct routes require that we take back right of ways from the automobile guys that have failed on the primary. They aren't delivering humans. And they also create massive crushing death by fine particulate, et cetera, death by not seeing people being there, So this is my sort of like
focus,
big focus in a way. And mountain bike like made total sense because it was taking it to a new place, and it's just like gravel today. Gravel's super popular because don't have to worry as much about traffic. Gravel race can be done without all the crazy road closures. The road closure is a lot easier on the gravel road, alternative road. So that's, and that's great and everything. But now it's back to like, let's talk about the, where people live, where the majority of people live, where they don't have to like stop everything, get in a car and go drive somewhere so they can go ride their bike. It's crazy. I always was sort of a Belgian idea of like, you're going to ride the race and ride home. I love that sort of idea, I sort of subscribed to that, and I think I overtrained a lot, because it was like, I look back at my history of racing, and it's like, oh, those were times when I did my best races in times where I wasn't training like a maniac.
Did you ever think like back then that it would take off as much as it did? Because I mean, like the growth, right, for you guys in the first year to then the second year was like a couple hundred bikes, and it was in the thousands.
Yeah, well, that was because it's a big country, and you advertise nationwide, you get nationwide exposure.
Yeah,
you can sell a lot of product if you have it, and that was the hard part of how to get the numbers up there. But you got to have a great design, a lot of hype, then you got to deliver. Yeah. And delivery means you got to support this thing too. And that's why like I chose like all the dimensions I chose were stuff that was like people were pretty much already making,
Okay.
And when you look at that, I mean, I saw like a history that somebody did up in Vancouver of a mountain bike, and they talked about the first ones just being sort of oversized road bikes. And you know what? They're right. And the design was held down and conservative, like I'd use Kemp and yellow English dimensions, just because everybody had the tools, we didn't have the wherewithal to do more. I mean, early on, I tried out a bike with 700C tires, big tires. There was Jeff Apps was doing the same thing we're doing, independent of us, completely in the UK.
Okay.
And it sort of the same thing. Their focus was not on downhill. Their focus was on just all terrain. His focus, it was like the original rough stuff guys. Mm-hmm. And he was, I reached out to him, and wow, and he had these Hakkapeliitta tires from Finland, and he sent some over, and I built some bikes around it, 10 bikes around that tire, 10 700C and 6 650Bs. And they were all like maximum width was 42 millimeter, and they were light. They tended to cut a lot, and with all import and everything, they'd be about $110 each at retail. And the 26 by 2125 size was well represented in one tire, the Uniroyal Knobby tire. And you could go to any bike shop in the United States. They had them in stock. It was $11.95 at retail. It's like, no, we got to do this. And then it was also the BMX guys had created a cruiser class, and BMX was the big thing, before mountain bike. And they started making these 26-inch rims, the Yukai and Araya rim, and they're really nice, 26-inch, real wide, like 40 millimeters wide, real wide.
All right, okay.
Back in the day, and then they're 19 ounces. They weren't bad at all, and they came in a bunch of colors, which is great, anodized and everything. They were real nice, but it really changed the way the bike rode. Yeah. When I was building those bikes with the big heavy rims, oh my God, that's where I set the Repack record, and nobody could touch it for a long time because the bikes turned to these twitchy little things, I mean, like the bike I had, the old Excelsior bike, it had an 18-inch chainstay, big long chainstay, and then the front end's a 68. And man, these guys get into the steeper angles, and it was like John Tomac, holy Toledo. That guy was riding a 72-degree head angle on his mountain bike with drops, and he was so flexible, and he could like just put all his weight on the front wheel, no problem, man. Everybody else is flipping over. I mean, that trend. There was also the LD stem by Ibis. Was it Ibis? Yeah, I think so. Scott Nichols, man, he's great. He's a great thinking up all these crazy ideas, and great names for things. He's wonderful. Anyway, it's been a great ride as far as like, it's been a crack up, the whole thing, the mountain bike thing. And there's been some really beautiful moments, and there continues to be, the whole thing. I mean, going to Crested Butte, oh my God. What a great place. I tell you my little story on it. So they wrote about us in the Co-Evolution Quarterly, which is, Stuart Brand and those guys, the Whole Earth Catalog people.
Mm-hmm.
They got this thing called the Co-Evolution Quarterly. So they covered the clunker scene here in Marin County. Oh, it was in the late 70s. And they put in a sidebar on Crested Butte. And so Crested Butte, Charlie calls him up and says, "Hey, man, we want to come out and do the ride." Well, long pause. "Hey, there's some guy from California who wants to come out and do the Crested Butte to Aspen ride. What do you think, you guys?" "Well, this is in the bar, the Grub Steak." And these, and the riders there were firefighters and miners and hardcores, and they weren't really bike riders. And there was a bike scene there, but it wasn't, a bike scene so much. And it was really funny. They said, "Okay, come on out." So Charlie calls me up. I'm out at Bicycling Magazine on the East Coast, Emmaus, Pennsylvania. And brother, I had my clunker with me out there, my road bike, my track bike. I had 3 bikes out there. And, I was out there for about a 3-month period. And he calls and says, "Hey, we're all going to Crested Butte." I say, "Okay, I'm there." So I booked a flight, just me and my clunker bike, Allentown to the old Stapleton Airport in Denver. They let me out on the tarmac. They hand me my bike, and I say, "Your next flight over to Crested Butte's right over there. It's a 4-seat Cessna. I take the front wheel off of my mountain bike, put it in the back seat, and sit there with the pilot." That's how it worked in those days. We flew in to this airport in Crested Butte that had no control tower, nothing. It was a dirt runway with a lot of rocks on it that went uphill. I look out the window, man, and there's like my friends from Marin County all there circling around on their bikes, man. I put on my backpack, I put on my front wheel, I ride into town. I'm in heaven. Oh my God, that place is beautiful. And it's close to 9,000 feet elevation. So I was fit, really fit right then, And I remember, it's like I went out on a 40-mile ride all by myself, like the next day or something. I just found that somebody give me a map. I went to some place that I got back and they said, "You rode a fucking bike out there? You could have died, man. You could have did this." It's like, yeah, all by myself. I was that sort of attitude. I do crazy stuff like that. But that was a great event, a great time. The first ride, it was just the local. There were no serious bike riders there. The very next year, there was a lot of serious bike riders, and it became a total center, for about until Moab took over, and then Moab got sort of overrun by up there at Vancouver, all that. And those guys changed the sport, They really did it their way. They built, the problem with Moab is that, the solution with Moab, it's just incredible rock, it's incredible stuff to ride, but they don't, they haven't built that many trails there. And they never got into that whole trail building thing like they got up, like they did up in Vancouver and the whole Northwest, they exploded everything, they changed things. And I look at the history sitting back now,
Where do you think it's all going to go?
I want to
kind of the journey and sort of now looking into, I guess, everything from the event side of things to the tech and
growing. It's still growing. I mean, I work for a big bike company, Trek, right? That's the Marlin bike. It's just a simple mountain bike with front suspension. That's the #1 selling bike worldwide. It's crazy and the bike just grows and grows and grows and grows. And it's just back to what it was in that it's a practical bike, and we, on that bike, that's sort of my baby in a way. About 10 years ago, I said, "Look, we do a great warranty service, for people. We take care of them all the time. We have total knowledge on what breaks, and therefore we have total knowledge on what does not break. Let's spec this bike with stuff that doesn't break, with stuff you can buy all over the world. You can get it right away. I want it to be a no-hassle bike. We'll make the frame out of this new technology with the hydroforming and everything. The alloy is the stuff with more zirconium in it. That's what Gary Klein brought to the table. It has more ductility, so it doesn't crack.
Okay.
It used to be aluminum frames that crack all the time, especially if you made them light. And great colors, great graphics. And that's been the secret. It's like last year we did on the top model, there's like 5 models. The top model changed the spec a tiny bit. The rest of them kept the same spec year to year, and it's just so the bike doesn't have a model year that could go out of date.
Yeah.
There's all these things, and it's been a runaway stinking hit. And also from trusted vendors. That is that they're going to always deliver. And if something goes wrong, they take care of it, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. And it's been a wonderful bike, and it's like okay. So that's my own. So I'm very, very biased, but basically what we're trying to do, I think that what makes the bike sell is more places to ride, more good places to ride that are fun. And it's good trail designers going to work in the cities. And I say, why not? And, you look at also, crazy stuff that isn't so crazy. Like we're going to go right through buildings, right over streets, things like that. It's like, how do you do it? You do it with wood. And who does it? Who's been doing it? It's like Ray's Indoor Mountain Bike Park started more than 15 years ago, and they're a hit, and it's like things like that work really well, and we know how and the greatest thing with that is they bring in people of all abilities.
Yeah, that's true.
They have a cross-country course and they have something wild to aspire to. We have now all the medical evidence that this is good for a kid going to school. He gets to school, he's done his stuff. He's ridden a bike and there's a certain amount of skill and stuff like that involved, and they come in more rested and more focused. And
I've got a 4-year-old, and he cycles every morning to school with me, and I either cycle with him or I run, and he's on his mountain bike, and
I know, and we know now also that this movement we make, skater does it, skier does it, surfer does it. Makes us happy. There's peer-reviewed paper now that says this works. People look at us bike riders. They say, take that smug opinion off your face. It's disgusting. Sorry, man. I'm just happy.
That's it.
What are you high on? Life. I really feel it. And that's it. It was part of the whole thing, you can really feel it. It's crazy. It's crazy. Like I'm watching the Worlds, and just like, man, the efforts and some of those time trials and stuff, the mixed time trial and everything. I know exactly how that feels. It's like, wow, that's like, that does humble you like crazy, Oh man, how you can do that to yourself, and it's like your own self when things are going great, though. You notice the guys that went great, like Alaphilippe. Holy Toledo. After the race, he's like, he was feeling great. It's a miracle. It's how, and some days you're on, and some days no. And people, and I'm just talking on the natch. That's just the way humans work. I know this. I didn't. It wasn't around that enhancement stuff when I was a racer, because there was not enough money involved, and nobody had a budget. At least I didn't know anybody doing anything, and you just have some days where you felt like Superman, and other days where you're just a regular Joe. And they come to everybody, and it's a miracle to watch that if they realize it, because sometimes they don't even realize it. And that's what a good coach is. I never had a really good coach at the top end. When I was a kid, I had a few different people teach me the basics. And somebody to just like, don't do that. When I was racing, you're an idiot, man. Because I acted, when I look back on it, I think, oh, why did I do that? That's what I loved about bike racing. I love about bike racing. It is such a strategy sport, and there's so many unknowns, and and it's incredible. When you've got over 100 competitors in a race, that's crazy, and you got a 1% chance of winning, and then there are people like pull it off, and then there are others that like just kill it on that day. It's like, whoa. I love it. Anyway, it's I still enjoy watching road racing, and mountain bike racing has just gotten good, you know,
Yeah.
really good, really good competitors, you know, and the courses. That's a huge difference. So I got a story on that, you know, the 29er. I go to the UCI headquarters, and I met Heinford Bugan. He sat in his office, just he and I. I told him, you got to double down on this BMX, man. It's an incredible thing, and you're not doing much, you know. He did. Then we go to a meeting with the technical side because 29er was illegal at that time.
Oh,
And
really?
oh yeah, this was like in 2000, you know. And they said to me, "Yeah, well, we don't want people bringing cyclocross bikes. You know, we're afraid that's what's going to happen if we let 700C in there." And you know, and basically my argument had been like, mountain bike has a lot to evolve still.
Yeah.
You know, hasn't come that far. Road bike, you put regulations on, I totally understand it. Makes sense. You guys got to figure it out. But I tell you, mountain bike, no, it's still in its infancy. This 29er, I'm telling you, is faster. This 29er is also safer. And the fact that it's safer, you know, you're going to have problems going forward. You cannot, you know, disallow a safer bike. There's no way. They told me basically, well, our biggest problem is that we're afraid that people will bring cross bikes in. I said, look, you got a bigger problem than that. You're making these courses too easy. So 3 weeks later, they send me an email saying, okay, we agree with you now.
We're going to make them harder.
Well, we're going to make them harder, and we're going to let you have 29ers. So we're going to take the wheel restriction off.
Yeah.
You know, which is the right thing to do, really. But everybody told me you can't do that. That doesn't work. I don't believe in that. You know, because I sincerely listen to these guys about their issues, you know, and that's a big problem when you come in and you know what somebody's going to say. They say it. There's a lot of times that you know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
And then you cut them off. They feel bad. And then you're screwed. You know, and sometimes you just want to like, I'll come back tomorrow at this time.
Yeah.
They have time to think about it. Sleep on it. That's another one that's been proven.
Yeah. and like with the like now, I guess with all the distribution and with cities changing, I mean, what do you think? Is that just going to kind of? Do you think like different organizations, different cities, and governments are kind of are catching on and are going to be changing things?
Yeah, there's a lot of different entities. Okay. Here it is. Okay, I went to this micromobility thing. Okay, and this micromobility, what is it? It's like the scooter guys, you know. It's all the rideshare things. It's, you know, bike share, scooter share, you know, all these different entities. And it was a lot of money walking around that place, a lot of VCs, because they're looking at changing things, you know.
Yeah.
And they look at the chain. I mean, Ford was represented with their brand, you know, Spin, and, you know, on and on. There was money there. And one of them, you know, like Andrew Wang was like one of the presidential candidates and ran for mayor in New York. He was there, you know, and this book is all about the bike side, from the bike perspective of like a cartoon about how messed up things are in traffic and how stinking dangerous it is and everything.
Yeah.
The battle. And so these people, they want the same thing we do as bike people. They want to change the dominance of the automobile because it doesn't work in cities. You know, just the simple math. When you have 1.3 passengers per car, which is a U.S. average, it just doesn't all fit. You know, you're stuck. It doesn't move. So these are really good allies. And it's like I told you before, I mean, we're like 120 bike people in all of Northern California. Okay. Next sort of inflection point was 73. And then those were the gas wars in the United States. And there were lines of cars around the block of a gas station waiting for gas. And bike sales went from 4.7 million to 15 million in 1 year. It was crazy, and everybody went out to go buy a bike. And then gasoline came back in and people put their bikes in the garage and didn't use them again. And people have been pulling those things out of the attic for the last 30 years or out of the basement, for the last 30 years. And the difference between then and now, which is another inflection point, where like a lot of people got back on bikes, streets got shut down and everything. It hasn't exactly gone back. You take New York City, 66% of its citizens said they want to keep slow streets, and we'll see. They got a new mayor in there. We'll see how many he keeps in and everything and how that goes.
Yeah.
But also, may I add that in 73, there were about 45 individuals throughout the United States that were bike advocates, big time, right? Now there's 45,000, a lot more, and things could change, and some places it'll go back to the same normal, but a lot of places I don't think so. And what's been happening also is the local trips have increased, and the longer commutes have decreased because more people work at home.
Yeah, that's it.
So it's interesting. So the highways are sort of like not as blocked as they were before.
Yep.
But all the byways, oh my God, like going out to the beach is crazy around here. I mean, it's like, if you don't get out there at 6 a.m, man, it just takes forever, because it's just a few 2-lane roads and everything. So things are broken, and people are starting to see that, they've got to make some major changes. And the other thing I also met the new head of Caltrans, and he's like, no, we aren't going to build extra lanes anymore. We're going to support rail. We're going to support this transit, and that stuff needs its support. I mean, the United States has so little and it's so poor that the public transit that, it's been strangled for quite a number of years. There's quite a few stories, about how all that happened. And I will say the automobile guys were incredible geniuses, and they had a lot of people's best interests in heart, but it's a land of unintended consequences, with the dream, it's sort of, I just want to make it a better place, where we are, I got these young kids, I got other kids, my oldest are down in LA right now having a great old time. Actually, my daughter does a podcast. Oh my God.
Oh, okay.
And it's really popular, and she's making good money from it these days. It's amazing. She's called Hollywood Crime Scene.
Oh, okay.
Sex, drugs, betrayal, murder. And she's got a partner, and they do it, and they're really popular. And my son has got a bar in a hipster bar in Echo Park, and it's like going off right now. He suffered greatly through the pandemic, and then he laid off all his employees, and just,
is it coming back now though? He's doing okay?
No, it's open now. So
nice.
It's crazy. He always had a really popular bar, but he had to like shut it down, for over a year. And so he did deliveries of, he's a purveyor of really trendy, cool wines,
Okay.
And he learned to be a brewer back when, and he was a brewer for a while in San Francisco, but it didn't pay well at all,
Yeah.
It was funny. And he did a test called the Cicerone test. I don't know if you heard of that. It's like the brewer's test, and the last third of the test is you smell these beers and figure out what went wrong.
Okay.
Because there are all these little tiny breweries popping up, and you can imagine, like, they brew this big tank of beer, and something's wrong. Do we try to sell it? That's where there's been some bad beer around,
Yeah.
But as a whole, the whole craft has gotten a lot better. Oh my God. Dangerous. Ooh, good. Anyway, he's in that business, the business of vice. Yeah. She talks about advice. And I sell goodness.
And if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way? And if our listeners and the people watching.
Twitter, Gary_Fisher, or Instagram, the same address, Gary_Fisher.
Nice.
They're probably the best, easiest.
Cool. Well, Gary, thanks so much for your time. And we could have gone on. I could have asked you. Yeah, we could have gone on for days and days just on the 60s alone. But it's amazing hearing your stories.
It is. And then every day I get put in my place by my kids. I love it, and it's crazy. I mean, chief cook and bottle washer. I don't mind. Everybody pulls in the house. It's really nice. So it's been really charmed. I really enjoyed conversation with you as well. And maybe we'll meet in the flesh someday.
That would be good. I've got to get over to the US. Yeah, as soon as things kind of open back up, I'm gonna try and get over there.
We'll travel again. Thank goodness we have good medicine. I mean, my wife's a doctor, and she's really can be skeptical at times. And she examined this new technology and said, "This is really good."
Yeah.